Well, England, they got the job done against Panama, didn't they? And Thomas Tuchel has promised there is much more to come from his squad, and there really needs to be, doesn't there, after another maybe slightly mediocre performance?
Yeah, the scales are sort of at a point where you're balancing them and you're not sure which way they're going to go, and it's glass half full, glass half empty moment. It's a junction in a tournament that I've seen many times before, where you've come through a group. I mean, we should never take for granted as a country that we finished top of the group. I've been part of many tournaments whereby we haven't finished top of the group and we haven't qualified through at all at times. So these players have set such a standard over the last few years that we expect so much from them, because the fact they've got to the latter stages of tournaments, and the performances against Ghana and Panama and even Croatia, there was imperfection there. There are some concerns. The eight outfield players that aren't Jude Bellingham and Harry Kane have got to knit together in this next few days and over this next week or so, because looking at Bellingham and Kane right now, they look like they're sort of delivering. The other eight, there are question marks over them in respect of, obviously, injuries, form, who do we play wide, who do we play at fullback, and that's the big question. Those eight players, you think about how those eight players for Argentina serve Alvarez and Messi. Those eight players for England have got to come together now and think about how they serve Bellingham and Kane, so that those two can go and win us the matches. And that's where the focus for me would be, and how we can sort of create combinations and units in those areas.
And of one of those eight players, I guess you're talking about Bukayo Saka. He was taken off, wasn't he, after an hour? He's got a few injury concerns around him. The star boy doesn't really seem to be sparkling right now. How concerned? And with a player like that, do you just have to keep playing and hope he finds his rhythm, or do you just take him out the firing line again?
I've never seen players find their rhythms in World Cups, really, from a point where Bukayo Saka is. I've seen it many times before. Let's be clear and explain what Bukayo Saka is to this country. He's an absolute gem. He's a star. He's a shining light, and has been for 5-6 years playing for Arsenal and England. On the pitch, off the pitch, he's been exemplary. He is amazing. I love him to bits. But what you've got to say right now is he looks like a player that we've seen many times before, who's run himself into the ground. He's started to pick up a few injuries, and he's just not got that sharpness right now at the point where you would want him to have sharpness. Declan Rice is a little bit similar. They've run through brick walls for Arsenal for 3-4 years trying to win that Premier League title. On top of that, they got to a Champions League final. And I say I've seen this before through tournaments, through history, where players have come into the actual tournament, they've just not been quite right. It's very difficult. It's not pre-season. This is a World Cup where people are at their absolute pinnacle of fitness, so it's very difficult to actually get it back at this point. I would think the best thing to do now, and Thomas Tuchel, to be fair, he's been quite sort of what would be emphatic around his decisions, is play players who are 100% fit. You might then be able to use Bukayo Saka for 20-30 minutes at the end of games to come on, where he's not having to go through the sort of 90 minutes. And I think he's managing Declan Rice's minutes right now. He's got the issue at right back. And so there are some sort of what would be plates that he's spinning more than he would like at this point in the tournament. He would like to have been in a situation, if you think about what Thomas Tuchel said before the tournament started, he wanted to use 14 players, I think. He's now used 17 already. So he's already, to be fair, off plan, because players are obviously dropping in front of him and aren't quite at the levels that he would have hoped. So, yeah, I think focusing in terms of players that are 100% fit. I've seen Wayne Rooney go to tournaments. I've seen David Beckham go to tournaments. I've seen other players come into tournaments where they're not quite right. It's very difficult to establish your fitness from that point when you're trying to get your sort of self ready. This is not a sort of dress rehearsal. This is the real thing.
You mentioned Rice there. What do you do with him in this game? I think Paul Scholes said give him another game off. Look, we know how good he can be on his day and how influential he can be, but listening to you just then, it's maybe time just to sort of rein him back in and maybe see if we can manage this injury in a different way if we want to get the absolute best out of him when it really matters.
I mean, if we're having to rest him in another game, then he's got a real problem. Declan Rice, like you say, is that player that you play every single week. You don't even think about it. He's number one on the team sheet. He's sort of the engine room of Arsenal. He's the engine room of the England team. When he was taken off at 3-2 in the Croatia game, first game, and people said, "Oh, he was just managing his minutes," I didn't believe that for 1 second, and I said it at the time. You don't take off Declan Rice at 3-2 against Croatia in your first game of a tournament unless there is a problem. So he has got a problem, Declan Rice. Obviously, the fact that he's been left out of the third game against Panama confirms that. He's managing stuff. He's obviously got a slight calf problem as well. I had enough of those during my career to know what they can be like. So, yeah, don't take a risk with him in this game. I think be brave. I think Thomas Tuchel is brave. He knows what he's doing. I think you can potentially get past DR Congo without Declan Rice. So if he is slightly feeling that calf and he's just not quite right, I would give him another few days because he's got enough energy and I think he can pick things back up. But yeah, it's a worry. Him and Bukayo Saka are a big worry because they are players that, to be fair, you would want them absolutely fit and flying. They're fantastic players.
Two players that you mentioned before that are absolutely fit and flying. The first in Jude Bellingham. It's hard to even think there was any debate over about his selection coming into this World Cup. How good has he been? And where else can he go over the next few weeks as you hope England will progress in terms of his form?
Yeah, that's the big positive. We've got a great goal scorer in Harry Kane, but we've got Jude Bellingham who's turned up. He's the one player that I think's playing at the level that you would say is at an elite level right now. He looks fit, he looks sharp, he looks strong, he's confident, he's taking responsibility on and off the pitch. There was never a doubt. I think before the tournament, those, to be fair, who were commentating from sort of what would be on England, many of us said that, he was a superstar and that, he's a player that you can't debate around, really. Obviously, the last 12 months have been quite turbulent with England. He's been left out of squads. There's been a lot of noise, but that noise has completely and utterly been, it's completely and utterly gone now because he's, like I say, he's fantastic. And he demonstrated against Panama the other day, a slightly different side to him where he wasn't he was brilliant in the second half when he scored his goal. The finish was wonderful. And then the little clip to the back post for Harry Kane was fantastic too. But the actual first half performance, he was the best player for England in that first half as well, when it was a little bit tougher. So that's when I always think you can sort of what would be assess players is when it's tough in the game, who are the players that are showing up, and he's showing up. So yeah, he's the big shining light. Him and Harry Kane, get them the ball as many times as possible in the last third and in the box, and we've got a real chance of scoring goals in the tournament. And then, like I say, it's that other 8 that coming together to make sure that they can get the ball to them as much as they can with quality, but also that they can combine as a defensive unit to make sure that we don't concede goals.
Yeah, let's one more on Kane. I think it's talk in some of the newspapers that Barcelona could be going in for him. He really is shining, isn't he, on the biggest stage? Is he probably the most valuable player to any team in terms of the World Cup right now? Because you look at maybe France and they can spread it around, but when it comes to Harry Kane, he is just so key for England doing well, isn't he, over the next few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, look at Haaland for Norway and I suppose Messi for Argentina are just, I'm not saying that they're sort of wholly dependent on those two players, but they're in a similar position. I think Mbappe would be very difficult to replace for France. I do think he is another level. I know they've got fantastic players around him, but I think if he was to sort of drop out, they would lose a lot. So, look, Harry Kane is as reliable as you can get. And in football and in life, you want reliability alongside. You want players who are going to deliver for you, and he does that. So, yeah, I can see why Barcelona would want him. I can see why any club in the world that's looking to win trophies at an elite level wants Harry Kane. Because I've said this before, I've described him as gold. He's incredible. And so you know exactly what you're going to get. And England know exactly what they're going to get as well. He had that little bit of an off moment where he missed that chance against Ghana, but he's allowed one with all the goals that he's scored, and I'm sure he'll be ready to fit and firing for the knockout phases. There's real jeopardy now. This is where the tournament starts for real. All the best teams are through, and yeah, it matters now. So you've got every chance that you get, every sort of mistake that you make. It's potentially going to cost you or it's going to send you through. So I think hopefully, if Thomas Tuchel has said we're going to step up, and we know Harry Kane will step up.
And maybe in the least surprising news over the last few days is that England have a problem at right back. Thomas Tuchel said, before the Panama game, Reece James' injury took him by surprise. I'm not sure it surprised that many who's kind of watched that injury record. And then Joel Quansah goes and plays. He gets injured. How avoidable all of this? How much pressure has this created on Tuchel? And what does he do now in that position?
To be fair, it's not the first time that I've seen England disrespect the fullback position in tournaments over the last 20, 30 years, where they've thought they can take one fullback and then someone else can fill in. That isn't going to happen. I mean, if you're playing against Vinicius Junior in a quarter-final, or you're playing against one of those French wingers, or you're playing against an Argentinian winger, you're going to get turned over if you're not a competent fullback. Look, he has got Jed Spence, which I think maybe he rested the other day. Hopefully, that was the reason he left him out, so that he could play for the rest of the games. But we are now, to be fair, very thin on the on the ground, and yeah, I mean, Livramento and Reece James, their injury problems over the last few years, it shouldn't have been a shock to Thomas Tuchel that this could have happened. They haven't been the most robust or resilient, and to be fair, I feel for them because they're very talented players, and you'd want them to be fit, and they'll be suffering enormously, not being fit, and they'll be hurting. But yeah, Thomas Tuchel would have been able to see that. Everybody in the country could have seen that there might have been an injury to Reece James or Livramento.
Yeah, just finally then, Gary, before we let you go, it's still early there, isn't it? Congo, DR Congo showed, haven't they, that they are capable of frustrating the big sides. We've seen them against the likes of Portugal in this competition. How do England go about it? What do you think they've learned maybe from those games against Ghana and Panama that can just make sure that England go through and carry on at this World Cup?
It's going to be tough. You've got to make sure that you sort of lock the back door and that you don't concede counter-attacks. We did concede a couple of counter-attacks. I mean, looking at in a different day, we'd have had a penalty conceded against Ghana for sure. The one that Konza sort of tackled. That's a penalty. So that could have gone differently. And then Panama, to be fair, didn't have the quality, but they did have the moments where they counter-attacked through us. So, making sure that we stop the counter-attacks is going to be really important. And then, I mean, I don't want to put it all down to set pieces, but it was a set piece the other day. The Jude Bellingham goal that just, made everything a lot more simple for us. So making sure our set pieces are really good and making sure our quality from wide areas into the box and our last and final pass or shot is of high quality. And like I said before, delivering to Harry Kane and Jude Bellingham in the right areas, because they will score goals. So, yeah, simple things. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to be patient at times, but play with speed. Make sure that you take the chances that come your way. Because if you go a goal up, it becomes a very different game for England. I think going a goal up early will make us all a lot more settled.
Let's hope so, Gary.